Welcome to the 52nd episode of Renegade Marketers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be exploring marketing's biggest challenges with real-life solutions from the country's top B2B marketers, all live stream via our friends at Restream. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. Longtime listeners to my podcast and this show know I'm prone to rant about how B2B marketing has gotten ridiculously complicated in the last 4 years without a corresponding increase in effectiveness, particularly when it comes to where you spend your money digitally. Well, in this show, I'm probably going to end up eating my words as these highly accomplished guests share how they are perfecting their complex digital marketing mix. So with that, let's bring on Ellina, Shinnick, CMO of Hub International and star of episode 17. Let's see, where are you? There you are. Hello, Ellina, how are you?
Hi, Drew. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Yes, wonderful to see you again. Now, where are you?
I'm in Chicago.
Okay. All right. And now we noticed in our research that you are fluent in Russian, and and we're going to have the rest of the show in Russian. So I just wanted to warn you in advance. And you speak Spanish. So how did the Russian happen? And did you ever consider a career as a linguist?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. I do think I'm a linguist. I think being a marketer requires you to be a linguist, right? You're a professional who has to understand language, empathize with people, be creative with word choices, right? So I do think that part of my brain and passion is being used every day. I was born in Ukraine. I came here as a young child and grew up in the United States. And I was fortunate that my parents were relentless in forcing me to speak Russian because, as you know, when you're a little kid, you want to just fit in and not take part, but they said no. So I'm lucky that, I just grew up speaking multiple languages. It was second nature. And Spanish, I just happened to love all things kind of Latin culture, Spanish culture. I've lived in Spain multiple times. Language comes easily to me, probably because I grew up in a dual language household. And so there it is in a nutshell, my love of language and my use of it every day.
No, and it's a great story for any folks, in bilingual households, the opportunity. I mean, kids can absorb 4 to 5 languages without breaking a sweat. It's really amazing. That's sort of one. And then the second thing is, do you have relatives in the Ukraine? And
thank you for asking. I don't. My entire family immigrated to various parts of the world. My parents have some close friends they grew up with. I don't know anyone there personally. Fortunately, they are all okay.
Wow. Okay, good. Thank you for that. All right. Well, let's set the stage here. We've got this huge topic of digital media spending. Give us an overview of how you approach it at Hub.
Sure. So at Hub, we are a B2B brand. We focus on middle market business, and we do have some small business. For us, digital really continues to play today, mostly top of the funnel, right? We're not a D2C business, Hub International Retail. Now, we just launched a brand in June called View by Hub. That is a digital embedded insurance broker offering direct-to-consumer insurance. And so that particular brand enables us to really deploy what you would call performance marketing in our world. And so that's a little bit more specific where we're using multiple channels and really looking at cost per lead acquisitions, et cetera. On the Hub side, for us, digital is truly part of an omni-channel mix where we position our brand for brand awareness. And the bulk of our dollars are really spent through LinkedIn, through targeted ads, as well as with specific endemic partners. So those would be industry publications. And the thing that has worked the best for us with those digital buys are usually kind of takeovers. So takeovers of their emails that they're sending out to their subscribers. We use those primarily to focus on driving attendance and registration for our webinars, which is a very effective channel for us for lead gen and engagement. So those are the two where we're really focused from the hub side. LinkedIn, organic and paid. We also have organic through Instagram and the other properties, and then mostly moving into endemic buys with really niche publications that we know have a high return for us, primarily in driving registrations to events, whether they're in person or digital. On the View by Hub side, that's our direct to consumer brand. That's a slightly different story. On that side, we focus very much on partners like lead aggregators in the insurance space. Those have been very effective for us. And we focus quite a bit on paid search. We also did deploy paid social for our D2C, but we did not find that channel to be very effective, cost effective for us. So in fact, we've pulled back. Right now, our two primary optimizations are in the aggregator space and paid search.
And are you trying, really interesting. And is there a sense that there's a 1-2 punch in any of this? I mean, LinkedIn organic and paid, a type of LinkedIn, or do you really look at, so I've got my LinkedIn activities, and then I've got these industry partners, and is there any sort of channel optimization going on there?
They work in tandem, so it's usually a mix. But I would say LinkedIn really is an evergreen channel for us. It's one of our primary brand building and community engagement platforms. So LinkedIn, we're deploying content multiple times a week, the entire year. And that's the channel we're using to position new thought leadership, to talk about relevant content that's important to our audience with respect to our value proposition. And that spans a lot of topics. So we have a number of things to talk about. So we do organic, and then we do boosting. We also, because we're in the B2B sales model that is heavily weighed through kind of our sales force, our advisors and our brokers, we also provide tools that help amplify them and their individual brand in the context of Hub. So we use tools like Hootsuite Amplify, where we create content that helps them share through their personal networks. And that, I really think, is an extension of our digital play on the organic side, because we know customers buy from people much more than they want to buy from brands. So we have our corporate handle, then we have tools like Amplify that enables our people to amplify the content personally. So we also do paid and boosting on LinkedIn to do highly targeted campaigns. So let's say we do have an ebook for the agribusiness target market or segment, then that's where we would do really laser targeted campaigns for those decision makers, sharing a specific piece of content that is worthy of being gated, that we might then put behind a wall, use that for lead generation and so forth. And then within the context of LinkedIn, we've really tried most things. We've tried DM style ads, conversation style ads that are powered by the bots and decision trees. They've been pretty effective, but we haven't really kind of gone to scale. We do things like LinkedIn Live, and those some have been effective, some have been less effective, but they're only as good as the content and as compelling it is, and you still get a very niche audience. But usually HR related topics tend to do pretty well when you're talking about people and organizational strategies. Those get really great pickup, not in all industries. And then in tandem, yes, it's a 1-2 punch. For example, when we're promoting a major event, such as a proprietary webinar or an annual campaign, the content that you would see on LinkedIn, organic, boosted, and paid, will be similar to the content you would see in the endemic ad that's published in that campaign time period. So we're really thinking about having a very clean customer journey, regardless of where they might find the content and engage with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways that these things disintegrate, right? Is if you have one sort of, you're reaching the same people, but you're telling them a different story. It's a problem. So what I heard, so in terms of what's working, it's obviously LinkedIn and verticals. What didn't work as well is paid social, which sort of gets us to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. And then in terms of organic content and things, again, it's about the people when you're dealing with LinkedIn. All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. It was a great overview. We'll be back to you in a second, but now we're going to, wait, I'm sorry. We're not. I have one more question for you before you come back. So you announced a partnership with Madison Square Garden, right? And
Yes.
let's talk about that, because I know that's not digital, but I'm just help me put some context around how this sort of fits in, supports, and where, if at all, any of this has a digital component.
Yeah. So actually, there are a few digital components with the partnership. So with our partnership, there are a number of things. I won't go into all of the details of the partnership. So first of all, epicenter of the world, Madison Square Garden, one of the most visited venues in the world, right? Most recognizable venues in the world. So our primary objective, as you can imagine, was to create really a strong platform for brand awareness. Because over the last number of years and through the growth of the company, our marketing organization has done a lot of work, but I would say still more focused on middle of the funnel with what we've been doing. And we haven't kind of done those major brand awareness buys and investments that you may see from other companies in various categories. So that is truly the primary intent, is to create the brand awareness we seek as we're growing and continuing to position ourselves as one of the top brokers in the world. However, in addition to, there is a digital component. As part of the partnership, we are doing custom content with Madison Square Garden, the New York Rangers and New York Knicks. We're doing custom content series. We're doing run of site ads, and you'll see our logo on several digital properties. So we thought about not just creating brand awareness within the property itself, which does have high traffic, but also using their channels and access to their audience to amplify our brand and co-create stories that add more dynamicism to the Hub brand that you might not have expected otherwise.
Yeah, and I think this is so interesting, and putting it in context is, there is this point in time where if you want to make a bigger leap, it's hard to do it in digital. And I think that as effective as digital has been, looking for a channel that can give you broader awareness like this makes a lot of sense. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So now let's bring on Mika Yamamoto, Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer at F5, and the star of episode 184 of Renegade Marketers Unite, and number 7 and 29 of this show. Wow, a third-time guest. Hello, Mika. How are you, and where are
Good to see
you?
you again, Drew. I am in Seattle today.
Okay, and dare I ask how the weather is out there?
It's really strange, I have to say. It snowed the last 3 or 4 days, and then now it's blue sky, and I'd anticipate that's probably going to snow in a few hours. So you just have to blink, and it changes. So right now it's sunny, but it was absolutely dumping snow when I drove into work this morning.
So I'm trying to listen to your accent, and I'm not hearing any of the Canadian cues, but we did see you went to Queen's University in Ontario, and I'm
Good.
assuming you hail from Canada.
I do. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. And if my kids were listening to this, they would be shocked that you didn't know us from Canada, just because they feel like I wheel that out at every chance I can get. So you'll probably hear a few nuances of my language. I don't say a, but I say project and process. And so there's probably a few things in my accent that you'll hear now that you know that I'm Canadian.
Yes, maybe about a boot.
I kind of house, yeah.
House, yeah.
Totally.
All right. Well, we'll listen for those, and we'll have a little. We'll get a thumbs up on those. So, but I also saw that you were building some bikes with the F5 team recently. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, at our company, we feel really strongly about what we do within community. We do so personally, and then we do so professionally. And so we wanted to, for the first time in 3 years, as is the case for many of us, we had our sales and marketing kickoff a few weeks ago in San Diego. And we are bringing all the marketers together, for which 60% of them had never actually gotten together live, because we hired 60% of them during the pandemic. So they hadn't met each other. We had a big team building exercise. So we thought, look, if we're gonna get together and do a team building exercise, let's do it to benefit the community as well. So we built over 25 bikes for kids in need in the San Diego area who wouldn't otherwise have received a gift over the holidays, and whose parents are struggling. And so we got to know our colleagues a lot better that came from all over the world, and we got to give some kids a gift over the holidays.
What a great idea, and must so fun. And I'm imagining, because there's so many different things you could have done, and we've been talking about this a lot in huddles, is the tendency now is when you bring people together was, well, let's work, 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 work. And the irony is that is the opposite of what you need to do. It's like you've got to build the team and the culture and the things and those connections so that when you do go back to virtual all over the
100%.
world, right? Okay,
Yep,
cool.
totally agree.
So let's get to the topic at hand and talk a little bit about your digital meeting spending and how you approach it.
I mean, I've been here for 3.5 years. 3.5 years ago, we actually had very little digital media spend. We were a hardware company. And so we believed at the company that much of what happens with customers happens in person. And so it was a massive evolution to say, hey, let's start spending on digital. We'd initially started spending in digital in demand gen, a lot of just nascent, syndicated content, for example, and we've expanded that spend to be focused on, what kind of buys do we need to do based on personas. Our company was born in driving load balancing for companies. So what that means is, among most of the Fortune 500, what we do is we help them load balance their website. So for example, when there's a Black Friday sale for one of the leading retailers in the world, there's tons of traffic that hits their site. We make sure that there's uninterrupted access to their website so they can keep buying when there's a concert ticket a hot concert ticket that people want to buy, not the one that we just saw with Taylor Swift. We make sure that people can actually get access to the system. And what happens there is that there's both load balancing and actually a lot of bots that go on and try to buy concert tickets. They try to buy shoes. They try to buy, cachet things that are in short supply. And so we make sure that the people are logging into websites are actually humans and not bots. People that are actually engaging in social media are actually humans and not bots, trying to sway a public opinion during an election, for example. And then we also make sure that people who are logging into a system are people who are actually, in fact, the people who they say they are. So they're not going into for example, a federal government site to say that so this happened to me during the pandemic. Someone pretended to be me and started collecting thousands of dollars of unemployment insurance, or they're not going into a bank account stealing, credentials off of the dark web and then logging in and stealing money. And so because we've gone into this business of driving cybersecurity, but we used to just do load balancing for websites, we're not known for cybersecurity as much as we are for load balancing. So we need to really target a new buyer, but it's new buyers within existing customer bases. So it would be a new buyer within a credit card processing company like MasterCard, or a big retailer, or a social media company. And so we need to get to know more people within an account. And so it's moving wider within the account. It's moving higher in the account to more senior individuals. And so the way we're evolving from just doing blasts, like sort of spray and pray, content syndication type buys, we're moving to be a lot more targeted and looking at using third-party data and first-party data to say who's actually demonstrating intent signals to buy. And then let's target ads, whether they're paid social ads or some display ads. Let's target those ads at specific either vertical people that work in specific verticals that have specific roles, like cybersecurity focused roles within specific companies. So we're getting a lot more targeted at actually for our top accounts that we want to penetrate further. We are actually targeting at specific people and individuals, and only those and prioritizing those companies that we do that with that are actually demonstrating, again, through third party and first party data and an intent to buy. So we're being a lot more focused and intentional about our purchases.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there in all of that, and it's so interesting because, almost the opposite in some ways of where Ellina's trying to get.
I was listening to her story and I was like, actually, we're doing something different. So it just goes to show that one size doesn't fit all.
Well, and I wanted the place I want to dig in, because a lot of companies find this challenge, we've never really talked about it in the show. We've talked a little bit about upselling and cross-selling, but what you're really trying to do is you've got an installed base, but might as well be a different company in some ways, because this cybersecurity person may not even know that F5 is being used at the organization, right?
They may not know that at 100%. They may not know about F5. In fact, they don't.
Right.
Very few cybersecurity people are aware of load balancing, and they don't know that we exist, they don't know we do load balancing or that we're in the company, but they also don't know that we do security. And so it's either looking for a warm handoff between one individual to another, get an introduction, or it's actually looking to say, hey, we do this within your company and we could do this we could extend and actually drive cybersecurity, help you from a cybersecurity standpoint in another part of your company.
And we're already an approved vendor.
Well, right. And that matters a lot. It mattered a lot during COVID because people were more likely to do business with an approved vendor, even if they weren't already themselves doing business with that company. And we're finding that actually is holding to be true as we look at an economically constrained environment. People are less likely to go in and do business with someone net new, even if that net new to the company, even if they're net new to that individual.
Right. And it just makes a lot of sense. And, we've been talking about this for recession planning for, really 6 months in huddles. And it really is about, expanding. 2023 is going to be about expanding partnerships and expanding customer relationships. And you were in this position. So it's so interesting. And so now we're saying, okay, I know the company and therefore I can probably find that individual. So it feels very ABM-y, and you also talked about intent data. So I'm imagining that there are tools that you're using that are helping you sort of do this. Am I correct?
That is totally correct. So, luckily about 3 years ago, we created an enterprise data ecosystem. We took all of our first party data and put it into Snowflake so that we could actually analyze and look at our data and determine, what our customers were owning, what they weren't owning. Before, it took weeks to be able to figure out what one customer actually owned and, what they owned end to end from us and what they didn't own. And to be able to, then we couldn't possibly have 3 years ago had, AI models and, hire data scientists to be able to go through the data and drive predictive analytics in terms of what they would buy next. And now we have that data internally. If we use that data and throw it up against third-party data that then shows, richer intent data that, that exists outside of our F5 world, it actually is very complementary and helps us look at, on an aggregate level, industries that are showing certain intent towards buying certain products, or within a geographic area who has intent, or within a set or a list of accounts, who is actually demonstrating greatest intent, so that we can drive more focus there. So it can be one-to-one if it's a really big account worth driving one-to-one focus on, or it can be one-to-many if it's vertically based or vertically focused.
So clearly this approach, and you've already said this approach is working. Is there any aspect of your digital mix that you tested in 2022 that didn't really work as well as you hoped?
Well, we pulled away. And just to be clear, we're just using this intent data, et cetera. We're just starting to do this. So, it's a lot more focused for us, and early indicators that it's actually driving a lot. It's just a lot more effective, just because we're not wasting our money and efforts on people who don't care. The things that we dropped it's not necessarily that we experimented with it, but we dropped syndicated, just really, really looking at how we're going to invest in syndicated content. We found that it drove a lot of leads, drove a lot of traffic, didn't drive much interest beyond that. So it really wasn't paying dividends. So really much more focused. So we amped up instead of that, amped up more by way of social ads, LinkedIn too. So that's what makes me think of Hub. And I was listening to saying, look, they were ratcheting down social, and we're ratcheting it back up. And so again, it just depends on the persona you're going after, and where you are in terms of trying to drive either awareness or trying to propel someone to the next stage in the pipeline. That matters a lot in terms of selecting what mix you're going to go after from a demand standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned syndicated content, because that came up several times over the course of the year. And what I get a sense of overall on that, and then we'll bring on Norman, but is that it works for a while and then somehow it just stops working. And it's like there's a 5% of the syndicated content people are actually real people, and then the rest are who knows what. But anyway, it is funny that it seems to wear out.
It does.
All right. Very cool. Thank you for that. It will be back to you, but now we're going to welcome Norman Guadagno, CMO of Mimecast and star of episodes 41 and 209 of Renegade Marketers Unite and episode 6 of this show. Hey, Norman, welcome back.
It is a pleasure to be back, Drew. So nice to see you and to add to my string of well-numbered episodes that I'm on. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. Well, you went, yeah. Now, so now the last time we had you on the show, you were, or in between, you were went from CMO to CEO, and now you're back with the CMO job. So first of all, we're excited about that. But you just couldn't stay away from the best job ever. What?
It is true. It is the best job ever. Sometimes the worst job ever, as we all know. But the fact of the matter is that, I went from CMO at a MarTech company and had a really exciting experience there, learned a lot. I had the opportunity to go back to agency side, and in fact, to go to a media agency as CEO. So a lot of what we've been talking about already today is exactly what media agencies do, which is find the right places to make those investments. And really had a lot of fun doing that, learned a lot from the clients that we had. But then this opportunity presented itself to get back to something that I'm passionate about, which is cybersecurity and personal security and privacy, business security and privacy. And, it is in my sense, the one of, if not the most interesting sectors right now for the technology space, because as Mika pointed out, there's so much traffic, there's so many opportunities for threats. And when the job here at Mimecast was presented to me, and I said, yes, this is something that I can be incredibly passionate about, so I can get back to the best job in the world as a CMO, which is really only an excuse to get on CMO Huddles and Renegade Marketers Live. So I feel
exactly,
good about that.
Exactly. Well, we missed you, and we're excited to have you back. So I know you've just started at Mimecast. So talk a little bit about, you're now in assessment mode, and how do you approach looking at this from a, digital media spending? And again, now you've had this newfound expertise, or it's at least fresh in your mind because of working at the agency. So talk about your strategy in reviewing this.
Yeah, it's a great question, Drew, and thanks for noting that. I haven't been here long enough to say that I've had any real impact, so I'm still in discover mode. But that's right, and I think that Ellina and Mika actually did a great job of talking about the broad scope of the types of things that we do. What I've been trying to do is really understand every single component of how we touch our customers. That is, going back to what are the customer journeys that we have to satisfy? Who are the customers? What are the interlocks with our partners and with our channel providers, so that when we look at the way in which marketing shows up in the world, that it feels coherent. And when I look at the numbers, the data, it's starting it from the top down. What are we spending and where are we spending it, from top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and then looking from the bottom up. What are the types of attribution touches that seem to work? How many touches historically before somebody becomes an opportunity? And you layer on top of that something really interesting, Drew, which is I joined, and the day after I joined, we introduced a brand new product to the market. And it had a whole new motion associated with it, with a free trial online. So I got to see that from day zero. And now I've been watching over the past 30 days as that's been growing and learning a whole new source of data and information for us as we plan our future state. So it's there's a lot to unpack, as there is in any modern marketing organization.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense to really go in there and try to figure it out. What's interesting to me is you mentioned attribution to get to sales qualified opportunity, or whatever term you all use, and how many touches that take. I heard a number recently that after that point, there's still another 20 to 27 touches to get to close.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and that's actually, we see a lot of that similar data. There's a lot of touches before it becomes an opportunity, going back 9 months, a year. There are many touches after it closes. And to the point of this discussion, more and more of those touches are pure digital touches. And so you have to think about, regardless of the type of customer you're going after, they're on a journey that always begins before you know who they are. And imagine projecting backwards in time to that customer when they're first going to begin that journey. How can you think about the ways in which you're going to roll back and try to intercept them? Maybe it's at Madison Square Garden when they're going to see a concert. Maybe it's with content syndication, but as we talked about, that has its problems. That points to the fact that you have to constantly rethink the mix. You have to be dynamic, and you have to pay attention to this. And as I said, we just introduced a new product which has a much shorter sales cycle than we've had in the past, because we want people to download a free trial. It is constructed in a way that we want to get quickly to be able to qualify them. But it doesn't mean that they haven't had many touches before they come and do that free trial.
So I'm curious, again, I'm now thinking not everyone goes from what you were just doing, digital agency CEO, to CMO. And so I keep thinking that you must have a fresh bag of tricks that you have, or at least a fresh bag of questions or things like, why are they doing this way, and so forth. And I'm just wondering, is there anything in your, that you did or that you did for some of your clients in your last job that really you thought, oh my God, this is amazing? And then, anything that you saw that you got, oh, we won't bother with that.
Yeah, it's, that's an interesting perspective, and I will say, I'm not gonna tell you all the tricks. I will recommend people go talk to the agency I just left, because it's in good hands and they're great people. But one of the things I learned, even more so than I had as a CMO, is in talking with some of our clients, how often they want to buy media either only at the bottom of the funnel because it's performance marketing and they can measure it, or because it's very top of funnel ego media, as I call it, that's going to show up where their competitors are going to show up. And you can think of industry conferences and other places like that. And we had a particular example of an unnamed client who wanted to be at one of these big shows and insisted on doing all of these high price, high impact placements. But the reality is that when you go to the actual show, there's so much noise, so many high impact, high value placements that they get lost. And in fact, we had a client that insisted on wanting to do graffiti style, guerrilla style street posters, right? They last about 20 minutes before the next guerrilla poster comes by and posts over it. And that's just reality. So what I've learned to do is step back and say, are we trying to get to our customers, or are we trying to satisfy ourselves or our board or our competitors or our own ego? Sometimes you have to do a little of that, but I actually like thinking that more often than not, we want to try to make sure we actually get in front of our customers, our prospects, our great partners that we want to be able to share the spotlight with.
So, okay, before we go to a quick little break, I have to ask you, so are you going to be a better client now that you've went back to the agency side for a little bit? Not that you were ever a bad one, but you feel a little more empathy for your agency brethren.
I do think I will try to be a better client. It's not the first time I've been on the agency side,
right?
So
I've
been back and forth, and I always recommend that if you're going to be a great client side marketer, getting some experience in the agency world sensitizes you to the reality of what they have to do. And I recommend it to marketers all the time. If you get a chance to do it, go to the other side of the fence, get that empathy, because that empathy makes you a better partner, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. We'll be back. I'm going to take a second and just talk about CMO Huddles. So, CMO Huddles was launched in 2020 as an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as a cross between an executive workshop and a therapy session. I have to say, the therapy part is getting more and more important as the marketing challenges get that much harder. So who doesn't need a little reassurance that you're not alone out there? Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. Since no CMO can outwork this crazy job, CMO Huddles is there to help you outsmart it. All right, let's bring back Ellina, Mika, Norman. One question: are you more on the therapy side or the executive workshop side of CMO Huddles?
I think I'm an even split, actually.
All right.
Yeah. I'll take therapy anywhere I can get it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more therapy for me, but
Mondays are workshops, Fridays are therapy.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny that you say that, because we're making our make goods huddles now on Fridays, and the request was to put them way in the afternoon. I feel like we should call them the zombie huddle, because everybody's so exhausted by Friday. Including myself, it's going to be a challenge. All right. I think you all know, you've been on the show, you've said wonderful things about huddles before. I don't need you to do it, but if you have anything to add at this moment that sparks you in terms of something you might have learned that you've used, feel free to share that at this moment. The stage is yours. Anybody want to say anything?
I think it's less about what I've learned that I've used, because I've learned a lot and used a lot. It's more an encouragement if you're if you're subscribing but not using Huddles, or if you're thinking about doing so, it's that it's a really great forum to be able to say what's on your mind in terms of, hey, I'd like to know more about how people are driving trade-offs in digital marketing between awareness and demand gen. How are people going back to the notion of events? How are you dealing with a hybrid workforce, ... And you can say a topic that you really are interested in talking about, and then get together with peers that, again, it becomes therapy and workshop, but get together with peers who have ideas or have similar questions, and you don't get to often, in your own companies, you're the CMO, you're on your own essentially, with your teams, of course. And so it's a really great opportunity to be able to hear ideas, be able to exchange thoughts, hear what works and what doesn't work. So I'd encourage everybody to partake if you haven't already.
I love that.
I'll echo Mika's comments. It's a terrific community. I've met a lot of wonderful marketers from many different industries who have shared nuggets with me that I've used along the way. And it's very energizing, even if it's kind of just a way to hear something you may have thought about and resurrect an idea, validate what you're doing. So it's always really good to just have a group of colleagues who understand what you're dealing with day to day that you might not in an organization.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you both. We'll get it. And Norman, you're welcome back.
And you know that I love Huddles, therapy.
Yeah.
And Mika's point, and Ellina echoed this. You're one of one as a CMO, and you want to work with your team and you want to help them be sensitized to what you do, but you're still in the seat, and you still have to be able to speak with peers in a way that they do understand the real challenge that you face when you are trying to make trade-off decisions often, right? The reality is that CMOs control massive budgets, often, one of the largest discretionary budgets inside the business. And we have to be able to make trade-offs, and we have to justify the expenses that we have, and we have to make sure people understand that. And it puts a lot of pressure on us. And talking with other peers who face the same sort of pressure is a good way to normalize it and to make it feel like, yes, I'm not alone.
I love it. And by the way, that's a perfect transition to the next topic. But just in case you were listening and you want to say, what is this? Just if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, check out CMOHuddles.com. Okay, so you brought this up, Norman, and I think this is so interesting. Digital marketing is hard and complex, and there's lots of nuances in it. How much does your CFO or head of CRO play in your, how much education do you have to do? Do they get a vote? And how does that work? I'll start with you, Mika.
Well, ours votes with his checkbook. And so, so it's a massive education for us, just because, again, we've gone from being a very people-driven, literally man-to-man type of combat in terms of how we build accounts and build relationships, to really an education to say, hey, the digital world is part of this world. And we saw that acutely when we cut over in COVID. And so it's really, the CFO, writes our checkbook. He's actually really interested in knowing what works and what doesn't work. And so being able to communicate the ROI of digital spend is important. The hard part that I'm finding, and again, this might end up being joint therapy, but is really, how do you drive that ROI in a model where we have a hybrid model? So we don't just exclusively connect digitally with our customers. We have digital connections and with the buying group, and we have connections in person. And so it's marketing influenced. It's definitely not directly marketing sourced. And so, and then we run into this challenge of what kind of attribution model do you use to say, look, did this spend in this channel, in social or in paid? How did that actually deliver on even a meeting? Like, even if we don't go to a closed one booking and we just say, how did it drive a meeting? Those attribution models are really challenging, frankly. I think they are, just when you have this type of in-person and digital engagement, and to know which ones work and which don't. Because we definitely know what drives traffic to our website, what's propelling someone to drive to the next stage, like what's driving stage progression is somewhat more challenging. So anyway, so we're looking to, always evolve our ROI model, but our CFO has been a great advocate and has been, a really strong partner for us. But he definitely is there for the education and for the
right.
Show me the money.
I imagine what he really wants to do is say, show me that this spend led to revenue.
100%. And what's the ratio? So if I spend $1, am I going to make 10? Am I going to make 7?
Right.
And, honestly, depending on the model you use, you get a different number, which is because we are not a, pure digital discover, learn, try, buy, because then you would have that direct pipe to be able to say, absolutely, we know that this delivered a deal. But because we're not, it does lend itself to some challenge in really directing that straight line to say, look, you spent $1, you got 8, or you spent $1, you got 5.
And imagine, Ellina, you have the same challenge.
Yeah, very much so. So on the View by Hub side, it's a little bit more direct, right? Because it's D2C. But on the Hub side, that's exactly it. It's a complex sell, right? You're buying benefits, you're buying risk management consulting, retirement plans. So our primary job is to get people to the site to validate that Hub should be a broker that's in their consideration set, and then we hand them off. So we look at how many leads are we driving, but then we also look at marketing assist. And so I'm fortunate that I have a leadership team that understands the value of marketing. They look at the overall results, but there is, I would say, some flexibility in the channel specifics because they understand the complexity of the sales, right? For our sales force, they have a budget for entertaining clients and getting prospects, right? And I don't think people say, like, did this one dinner and this one beer, did that generate the $500,000 account? Or why did you not buy this beer? Right? It was like
it was the third martini that closed the
exactly.
deal.
It's always the martini that works.
Yeah, it's sometimes kind of frustrating and a little ridiculous to me, right? Like, it's like our colleagues spend money too and they're testing. It's a little bit of a joke, whether it's the seafood platter or whatever, but they're optimizing. And so same thing, right? It's like, which social media post is going to drive, it's a combination and the results are there. So I would say I'm fortunate that there's an understanding around the impact of marketing. I don't always have to say this one post generated 3x ROI. But in totality, in the quarter, we met our targets and we did it in a cost-effective way within the budget.
Yep.
So yeah, because sometimes I'm like, really, did you ask them about the the seafood tower?
Yeah, it was the chocolate mousse. I mean, clearly that was really the thing. That's the signal. That's it. That is the one intense signal when they buy dessert. Though, so this begs a question. So on one level, and it's there's awareness. If they're not aware of you, you're not in the game, right? So period. And so it feels like that has to be. And I'm wondering, do all three of you have awareness against your target measures?
We just started to invest in awareness because we didn't actually, philosophically as a company, we believed we didn't need to spend on awareness. And so it took 2 years to actually justify that we should spend on awareness. And it was during actually the height of the sort of, we started to see some, I'm sure everybody saw irrational exuberance in hiring and people getting scooped away for 3x more money. And so it was actually around people, and actually people not being aware of what we do, and we couldn't hire fast enough, and we couldn't make ourselves aware, like couldn't make others aware enough that we existed to hire people. So that actually was the last straw to say, look, we really need to get out there to drive awareness. And we started to invest in awareness. So we hadn't typically invested in awareness, but we started to. And I think something that we have to bolster is our paid search, because that drives a ton of traffic, but we're also driving, social and display to drive awareness, and really realizing that actually ratings and reviews, earned media, as well as thought leadership is actually, we're extending our awareness to say, look, it's not paid media as much as it is what are third parties saying about you, including your customers, driving a lot stronger customer advocacy, and driving a lot more thought leadership in the market. So awareness is certainly, we started in paid for awareness in earnest in June of this year. We combined that paid with in person as we started to go back to events. We were actually doing classic 2010 moves of, wrapping cabs and buying ads in airports. But the complement actually really, really worked. And it was probably because we were just coming back into physical events where it was actually novel again to see your brand in a physical space. But so yeah, we're definitely amping up our spend on awareness to hire and retain talent, to keep our partners actually realizing we're relevant, to keep our existing customers realizing we're relevant, and also to attract new customers.
Amazing. Yeah. And so at least, and you can see, and you'll see it both in terms of the performance of your search, because the more aware you are, the lower cost per click it'll be, because more people will choose it. And you'll see it hopefully in other ways. As you said, these are complex sales and so forth. So I'm wondering, though, in light of all this, and when we're dealing with the world of marketing influence or marketing assist, both pre-qualified lead and post, how are you deciding what's effective either before or, in the pre get to the lead part, or the post close the deal, and how are you sort of pulling the levers? Yeah, I mean, because if it's simply marketing assist, marketing is assist every sale. I mean, they're not going to buy without going to your website. Probably not going to buy without trying to look at a video on the site, or, are they?
But that question, Drew, is I think the essence of you can't have a static plan anymore. You truly have to be moving along with the dynamics of the market. And Mika pointed out the fact that, coming back after the pandemic, it was great to go into out-of-home advertising because people weren't used to it. They were back out in the world. But all of a sudden, everybody jumps into out-of-home advertising, and then you become lost again. So you have to pivot somewhere else. And you have to keep your brand relevant, because there are thousands of new brands in every category being created every day, and they're all vying for that top of mind, top of funnel, early stage awareness. So you have to play in that game, and you have to make sure as you guide them through that journey, you don't, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, this touch, it worked, We bought them the beer, right? They got over the line.
It was the
but,
most,
But
yep.
the reality is, and you pointed this out, like if all we did was calculate what works, then we would spend 100% of our dollars on search, except search doesn't work that way. But search always reliably gives you clicks, but we know not to spend 100% of our dollars on search because it misses everything else. And what we have to do is peel back from we know that works really well. And I always look at it through the lens of search is sort of well known. You can lower your cost per click by making sure you have greater awareness and investing in it, but it works in a fairly predictable way usually. And if you start to back out from what's the actual minimal amount you can spend on search to get the results you want, you can start moving your dollars back to earlier stages and thinking about the right level of investment at each of those stages to arrive at that well-known, easy to measure thing that happens right before they hit your website. And then you take them on that journey post-click as well. And you have to invest in more thought leadership, more contact with people, bots on the site. Those are additional post-click things you have to think about.
So getting to this issue of attribution, which we talk about, and I'm curious, are any of you using a tool like Visible and does it work? Not to put them on the spot, but I mean, do you have a tool that you're using for attribution?
We're using Visible.
Okay.
And we have been. Again, we're just looking at the model just because we're struggling with how much weight we put on any one of the touch points to say this was the touch point. It was this beer. It is the same as, so I love that. I love that analogy. Was it the beer? Was it the creme brulee? Was it the mousse? Was it the webinar? Was it the fact that they downloaded this white paper? Was it the fact that they came to this physical event? And it was probably yes, yes, and yes. Right. And so that attribution model is so hard that they attended. It's hard to know that they attended a webinar and saw the whole thing. Did they watch it on mute the whole time? So it's just so hard to know whether that was the thing that led to the meeting. And so we do use it. We're combining that with, look, when people do come to a webinar, the percentage of people that then go to the next interesting moment or the next conversation. And so we're looking at more of that in terms of, look, if they came to a physical event, if they went to a webinar, if they read a white paper, how many of those people then went and did something else? And that's how we're actually generating a lot more value. That in addition to, information again about Visible, in addition to information where we're looking at the buying group, not just the individual that's buying that our sellers are connecting with, but looking at whether we're expanding the buying group or contracting the buying group, and how many people in a buying group actually is correlated to the size and velocity of a deal. And so it's the attribution models themselves in and of themselves, I think, are really challenging to be able to say, yes, absolutely, this is what works. I think for us, we need to look at a combination of data points.
Yeah, I mean, and that's clearly, if we get to this world where there's 27 touches after we've got a qualified opportunity, then you're really at this impossible notion of 100%. Which of those 27 mattered. Kind of all of them.
Right.
Kind of all. And that's really, so this is a difficult part of it, but I know we're going to get better at it. And I know you all have data people who help you get better at it, because you have to make choices, right? We have to optimize, and it is some combination. I typically on the show find a moment to ask what Ben Franklin would say, and he would struggle with this because digital didn't exist at his time, but he was in the media business. He was a publisher, and he sold advertising in those, in the Philadelphia Gazette and other things that he published. So, but he looked at spending from a personal finance standpoint. And what I think he might remind us of, if you know how to spend less than you get, in other words, your money and you make it, you have the philosopher's stone. So this gets back to this notion of we're spending a certain amount of money to get a 10x return or an 8x return. I think that's what he would sort of get us to think about. All right, well, we can't have him here, but we do have three amazing folks who can help us think about we talked about this. This is about optimizing a spend that's very difficult to measure except for search, which Norman points out. So let's talk about maybe 2 do's and a don't from each of you in terms of how are we going to optimize digital spending in 2023? And I'll start with Norman because you were last up in the beginning.
I love starting that. I don't know what Ben Franklin will say about this, but 2 do's and a don't. Do make sure that you are really thinking about pulling back on the things that you can measure incredibly well so that you don't underfund the things that are less easy to measure but still important. Do make sure that you are showing up where your customers show up and are in the state of mind that are ripe for what you're offering them. And don't mistake attribution for motivation, because you may know that they attended something, but you don't really know what motivates them to move to the next step. And that's a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's funny. So in today's newsletter, for huddlers, it's a recap from a huddle that we had in November, and one of the huddlers mentioned the FIRE methodology, which is fit, the customer is fit, their intent, the sort of the recency, and then the E for engagement, and trying to create this sort of measure so that you can. And I'm wondering, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I wonder. That's got to fit into this or some similar model where you're creating sort of scoring systems. And that's all. Okay. But so next up, we'll go with Ellina. What's your 2 do's and a don't?
So do always set targets, even if you're trying new channels, have a benchmark or at least a moving target that you're trying to optimize to. That's number 1. Do work very closely with your sales organization, wherever your sales team may live, whether they report into you or a chief revenue officer, because ultimately we should be measuring all the way through to the sale. And so driving the pipeline and cost per lead is great. And those are KPIs that marketers directly control. But at the end of the day, you should really be thinking about the overall business goal. And you should look at the end-to-end journey and bringing your sales organization, and do look at the reports together end-to-end on a weekly basis. Don't forget that buyers are people, and they don't spend 24 hours on digital, and they like to consume content through different channels and textures. So think about digital. You can measure it. It's critical, but it is not the end all be all in the marketing strategy.
There you go. And I love that. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about on the show, but is so important, is this, that you're not spending for your own health. You're spending ultimately to drive revenue for the organization. And so having the CRO have a clear window into it. And then I want to sort of, this came up in a huddle the other day, where you no longer talk about them as sales qualified leads. You just, whatever your company name is, it's F5 qualified leads or opportunities. We no longer think about sales and marketing as separate things, because in fact they're not. There's pre and post, and marketing is involved. Okay, Mika, bring us home.
I'd +1 Norman and Ellina's thoughts as well. Do use multiple, like when you have targets, do use multiple data points. I mean, a target is a 1 number or typically several numbers, but use multiple data points to see whether something does or doesn't work, just because it's so hard to drive a complex sale. And with multi-touch attribution, you just need different types of ways to see whether certain investments are working. Do be mindful that, Ellina, to your point that you made just a second ago and earlier, is that you're dealing with human beings. They're not just dealing with you in digital, they're dealing with you in person. And so make sure you're consistent with your messaging and consistent with the, across your journey in terms of the types of conversations you're having with your customer versus having them be siloed. And lastly is, don't assume that one size fits all, right? I mean, just think about your personas, think about whether they're an existing customer or a net new customer, because one size and one approach doesn't fit everybody.
Amazing. Oh my God. We just got the best Tuesday tip ever. Those 3 combinations of things. I want to thank you. The one thing that you talked about that I just want to put a big punctuation point is consistency across channels really does matter. It really does, both on digital and offline. Okay. Ellina, Mika, Norman, you're all great sports. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about refreshing brands with Bill Strotterman, Rashmi Vittal, and Julie Feller. Cue the music. Renegade Marketers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Laura Parkin. For show notes, past episodes, and the latest on my book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, which, by the way, was named Best B2B Audiobook of 2022, please visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.